Rave culture was always supposed to polarise people. Depending on your experiences, it's either one of the UK's great exports or a symptom of our own moral decline. But after a nationwide clampdown in the mid-90s, the scene was forced further into the underground, with new superclubs and licensed, sanitised parties taking their place. Recent years.
Transgressive acts can be explained as a breaking of social norms or moral boundaries, with transgressive acts being intentional and often bringing with them feelings of pleasure. Transgressive behaviour is often seen to be a threat to the stability of society. Rave culture is an interesting example of transgression. Stemming from the hippie movement and New Age travellers of the 60s and early 70s, popular countercultures of the time. Rave culture began with free festivals of this period, where people came together to dance to repetitive beats, fueled by recreational drug use. These free festivals were a chance to evade everyday capitalist society in search of a more communal way of living, an opportunity to break free of moral constraints, even if just for the weekend.
Festivals were reflecting and questioning Thatcher's New Britain. Unemployment had reached record levels and anxiety reigned.
People were just leaving the cities in droves, young people with no hope of a job or anything. You know, three guys would chuck 100 quid in and buy an old coach from the back of a coach company, you know, one of their old ones they retired, throw a few mattresses in and head off.
And so what happened was that movement grew and grew and grew. And suddenly, instead of just the kind of sort of, you know, slightly better off hippies making their kind of arts fair up in Norfolk, like the Albion fairs and so forth, you drove a whole load of sort of quite hardcore working class people from up north onto the road.
In 1979, I think there were 6 vehicles at Stonehenge, you know, and by 1984, there were thousands of people hitting the road. More and more people appeared on the festival scenes, drinking, you know, the whole punk sort of attitude, you know, fuck everything kind of thing.
The era of free parties and festivals was soon brought to an end after the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act of 1994 was put into place. This outlawed large-scale outdoor parties involving music. This act directly targeted rave and the music associated with the scene, with an aim to destroy rave culture, which was and still is well known for its transgressive tendencies. Illegal free parties do still take place, although this is now on a much smaller scale, with the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act forcing these events into the underground rave scene. The rave scene that we know today emerged in the 90s, holding similar values to that of free festivals and parties, providing an escape from mundane everyday life. The emergence of rave culture coincided with the widespread use of ecstasy and the international spread of house and drum and bass music. The majority of raves today take place in legitimate venues such as clubs and festivals. Rave culture can be understood as a transgressive act, creating a form of rebellion against society's social norms and expectations. This rebellion takes a number of forms in the rave scene. Throughout the emergence of rave culture during the free festival and free party movement, the rebellion was focused around creating an anti-capitalist counterculture. After the Criminal Justice Act and Public Order Act outlawed these free parties, illegal raves took their place, creating a new form of rebellion where ravers break the law simply by attending such events, with the police often being brought in to try and disperse illegal raves. As the rave scene has progressed into now mainly legitimate venues, drug taking is the remaining form of rebellion and defiance taking place against society's norms and values. Each of the stages through rave culture's progression all involve an element of risk. Risk often comes hand in hand with transgression. It is widely known that the rave scene comes hand in hand with the widespread recreational use of drugs, particularly ecstasy. The taking of drugs is a transgressive act, bringing with it risk and pleasure and breaking wider society's norms and boundaries, with drug use widely perceived as harmful and deviant to wider society. However, within the rave scene, the use of drugs is normalised, where they are used in a largely harmless, hedonistic manner. Raves provide a period of liminality in which social norms and values which ordinarily everyone adheres to are discarded. At rave events, attendees often form instant friendships, creating a sense of community, dance until sunrise and take recreational drugs. These come together to create an environment unlike monotonous day-to-day life, providing a short escape from reality. These rave events can be understood as heterotopias, the term used to describe spaces of transgression. The concept of heterotopias was explored by Michael Forecourt, who used this term to describe spaces which are understood as counter sites, such as brothels, prisons, asylums, etc. Within these counter sites, the order of things is challenged, creating unpredictable spaces which often facilitate practice of resistance and transgression. Raves can be described as heterotopias as they are spaces built around various transgressions such as drug use and trespass, which are often thought of as deviant acts and present the other to the rest of society. Heterotopias create transformative ways of seeing the world. This is relevant to rave culture as raves are often used as a form of resistance against society's norms and values, particularly in the early rave scene, which stood against the right-wing ideology of the time. This resistance against society's norms and values is a key element of transgression. Forecourt describes modern heterotopian sites as spaces for separating out some form of deviation. Raves can be seen to do this, providing a space for those classed as deviant in society for taking part in transgressive acts. To gather together in a space where transgressions such as drug use are tolerated and accepted. Forecourt specified temporary spaces of transgression as being heterochronias, rather than heterotopias. Heterochronias embrace temporal discontinuities, with Forecourt using the fair as an example. Heterochronias can be used to identify festivals and illegal raves, where empty, lifeless fields or warehouses are transformed into spaces of hedonism and transgression for a short period of time before returning to their previous state. Michael Forecourt went on to describe heterotopias as being blind spots in the panopticon, the panopticon being used to describe the surveillance society in which we live. Raves can be understood as blind spots in the panopticon, where illegal, transgressive acts openly take place in a society ordinarily ruled by surveillance and order. Transgression and subcultures are closely related, with transgressive behaviour and transgressive identity politics often stemming from subcultures. There is no one definition of subcultures, however one which can be used is a group of people with a culture which differentiates them from the larger culture to which they belong. As rave culture took off in a period of fast social, political and ideological change, and with rave culture standing in direct conflict with the right-wing ideology of the time, it was vilified by both the media and governments of this period, such as Thatcher's and John Major's Conservative governments. This led to a moral panic surrounding rave culture, with fears of it being a threat to societal values and interests. Moral panics often come as a reaction to transgressive behaviour taking place in society. The moral panic surrounding rave culture in the early 90s saw the police, the tabloid press and the right-wing government join forces to arouse suspicion and fear regarding the rave scene. Notable events such as Castle Morton, a huge free festival which took place in 1992 with 40,000 attendees, fueled this moral panic, bringing huge media attention to the scene, particularly drawing attention to the drugs, travellers and trespass linked to the rave scene.
50 people have been arrested and a police helicopter fired at with flares. The travellers say they won't be moving on for a few days, and tonight the festival still appears to be in full swing. Local people are angry about finding drug-taking equipment dumped in gardens and sheep savaged to death at a local farm.
This cautious distrust of rave culture and the transgressive behaviour which comes with it continues today, with the media still fueling this moral panic. For example, the press frequently draws attention to drug overdoses linked to raves, with headline stories such as the closure of the well-known club Fabric in London, bringing negative media attention to the scene, with Fabric losing its licence after the death of 2 teenagers, when in fact these tragic events are very rare, being amplified to create public fear surrounding rave culture.